Hi, it's Krista, and today I'm going to show you how I manipulate shadows on my layouts so that it kind of looks like a realistic old school or hybrid scrapbook page. I don't know about you, but as I was a kid, I used to have a scrapbook. I still do, as a matter of fact, but it was with that manila construction paper, with that little cardboardy type of cover with the little string, and I would tape in my ticket stubs or cards and pictures and whatnot, so I could save all my little precious items from a trip or from school and what have you. And basically, what we're doing here with Photoshop is we're trying to recreate that same realistic style of scrapbooking. It gives the illusion that it is dimensional and real life as opposed to a flat photo. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and show you how I do that with my own pages. If you can just see, this is going to be the final product, but as you can see just by looking at this, this is showing dimension on the feather where it's a little bit rotated, so it kind of looks like it's popping off the page. Same thing with the photo. It's bending a little bit, so it could be like you taped it in the back of the photo to the paper, and so it's lifting off a little bit, so that's where this little bit of distance is coming. The little ribbon here, it's being tacked down by this little brad, and it's directly connecting here to the photo, and then it's lifting off just on the little edges here. Same thing with the photo, lifting off of the paper. And then of course with your flowers, because they're all one on top of the other, the flowers closer to the background paper are going to have a smaller shadow, whereas this one is on top of that flower, so it gives that dimensional feel, but also it gives that that feel of softness and a larger style of shadow so that it looks more dimensional. So that is what we're going to accomplish today. And while this is my final product, as I'm going through, you might pick up some additional tips on other things, and also it may not come out exactly as this one is, because every time you do things it does come out a little bit different. However, the whole thing is to enjoy the creativity of making the page and making it as realistic as you want. So let's go ahead and get a new workspace. I'm going to click on New, and my workspace that I'm using is 600 by 600 with a 72 resolution, and that's for web-based pages. Others use 3600 pixels with 300 depth per inch resolution for printing purposes. I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and here's my blank workspace. How I do this is I start off with my papers, and I'm going to go ahead and grab a few of those. So place embedded. The reason I use place embedded is so that I don't have a whole bunch of files open on my work, in Photoshop. It confuses me because I forget where I have them. So this helps me and makes it a faster process for me, because obviously this is what is normal for me, but do it however you feel is easiest for you. So I'm just gonna go ahead and bring in this big dotty paper, and I click the check mark, and now I'm gonna go ahead and grab a few other papers, and this blue dots paper will be placed above the big dotty paper. And I want to change the blend mode on this to a soft light, and I want to duplicate this again by just right clicking duplicate layer, or you can do Control J, and that will also duplicated that as the shortcut. And now that's a little too stark, so I'm just going to adjust the opacity down just a little bit to bring back some of that color. So as you can see, I have 3 different papers together, and I'm creating a brand new paper background. So that's just by adding this other paper with a soft light, and then we add it again. So now I have 3 papers, which you can combine and merge, or I just leave it as separate layers. So I can adjust it if I decide later on I want it a little darker. I can go back to that layer and adjust it. I want to also add this painted edge, so I have some border going on, and we'll go ahead and stretch that with the bounding boxes just to transform it. Hit OK, and for some reason that ended up underneath, so I'm just going to drag that up in the layer panel. And there we have my background. I want to go ahead and grab my photo frame, because that's the next thing that I want to, that's going to be on the bottom. So I have my papers, then I'm going to have my frame. All right, and I've transformed it by using the bounding boxes to make that smaller. Then we hit OK. So now we situate that where we want it, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the layer style, adding a layer style, which is that FX, and I want to add a drop shadow. So I'm going to click on drop shadow, and that brings up the layer styles box, and it already has it clicked on drop shadow. Now you may have styles in your that you've purchased from designers, and by all means, if you like those shadows, you can go ahead and use them as a base to begin adjustments of manipulation. I'm going to just go ahead and just use these sliders and make my own for this particular page. And the distance is going to be the distance from the background that you want your frame to be at. Now, because this is really close to the background, you're not going to have as much shadow. It's going to be a smaller shadow because it's close to the base. So I want to make that at least about a 7. Now here with your angle, that's dependent upon which direction your light is coming from. Most people use a 45-degree angle, and that will make your shadow go from right to left. And if you use 120 degrees, that will make your shadow go from left to right. If your light is up here, it's going to be in that diagonal for the 120 degrees. So I'm going to put the distance, default a lot of times is like 5 or so, but I'm going to, because this is very close to the paper, I'm going to make that about a 4. The spread is, I'm just going to leave that about 1. And then my size of the shadow, if you slide this, it's going to, the higher the number, the softer it gets, and the bigger it gets. So it's going to be, if I slide it like this, you can see how big the size of the shadow is. So I'm going to just make this about 6 or 7. So now I have my shadow. Now I can go ahead too, if you're in that window style, double click on it and reopen it, you can change your settings here. You can, with it open, if you just click on it and with your mouse you can just move it around, you can put the dimension or put the shadow anywhere you want. You don't have to just use those bounding boxes, the setting boxes. So I'm going to leave that about 40, 45, 47. Yeah, that'll work. Actually, I'm going to slide it back a little bit. But as you can see, it changes the numbers in that box. Okay, so I have that about 39 degrees and it's 7 and 1 and 7, and I want to change that distance just a little bit. Change it back down to, I think we had it at 4 before, so it's easier to do it this way, 4, and then I think we had this at 6. But whatever dimension you want. Like I said, this is going to be smaller because it's closer to the paper. Now with that already done, I want to, I'm going to right click on the drop shadow and select create layer. And what this does is it separates the shadow from the object. So my element or object was the frame, and by right clicking it is separating that. The reason I want to do that is because right now I want to add a little bit of a wave to it, and I want to distort it just a bit so it's going to look like it's lifting off the page. So by selecting the shadow, created shadow layer, I'm going to go to Filter, Distort, and Wave. When I click on Wave, as you can see here, this is the default that I have it set to, that I like for my wave. I have the number of generators is 5. I have a wavelength of 1. Max is 999. Amplitude of 1. Max of 6. The horizontal and the vertical is 100. The sign is checked for type, and then repeat edge pixels is selected. And when I click OK, this will warp the shadow or distort the shadow. So now it put it in a wave motion. Now I want to go ahead and just do a little bit more with that. I'm going to go back to Filter, Distort, and actually I want Edit, Transform, and I want Distort. So there's two different distorts. One is through the filter and one is through the transform. So this time I'm going to go through the transform. I'm just going to grab that bounding box and pull it out just a little bit. I'm going to grab this transform and just move it up a little bit so it pretty much looks like it's attached here and it's pulling away with some distance here. I'm going to do the same up top just a little bit so it's sticking out just a little bit. And here it kind of fixes it, and now we're good. So I'm going to click on the move tool to set it, or you could have clicked on the check mark. So there's that. Now I want to go ahead and I'm going to just make a little box here. I'm going to fill that in and put that space, going to add a new layer with the add new layer, create new layer icon. So I add a new layer between the frame and the shadow, and here's where I'm going to add a flood-filled page color, because I want to clip my photo here. So I'm just going to fill that in. It doesn't matter what color you use. I'm using a gray here, but you can use any color with the flood fill paint can tool, because we're just going to be clipping our photo to that. Now I'm going to deselect, Control D, or just select deselect, and I want to grab my photo. Like I said, this was from Pexels.com, free stock photo, and like I said, I wanted it autumn leaves, and I'm just going to use the bounding box just to size it a little bit, and I'm going to use the check mark to set it, and I'm going to, in my layer panel, I'm going to hit the Alt, hold down the Alt button, and going to move my mouse, see the little hand, I'm going to move my mouse till it gets on that line, and I get the little box with the arrow, and I just left click with the mouse button, and it will clip the photo to that mask that we made. So now our photo is inside the frame. Now, as you can see, we have some, it's a little bit dark here. I'm going to now manipulate this. Now that the photo is in there, we can see a little bit more what how we want this to look. I'm going to adjust this a little bit further. Now you can do this with a few things. I'm going to go ahead and use this little smudge tool, which is a little finger pointer, if you can see that here in your tool panel. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and now it gives you the brush tool. If you can see, I'm using a soft round brush, and right now it's at 150 pixels. I'm going to use my bracket key to make that smaller or make it larger. I'm going to use the right bracket key to make it larger, the left bracket key to make it smaller. So I need a little bit bigger, so I use the right bracket. And now if you push in with that, it's going to slide in your shadow so it looks like the paper and your photo is attached right here in the center. I'm going to grab the corner out so it looks like this is peeling up from the corner, and I'm going to do a little bit of pushing on this side as well, just so you can see where it might be, you know, attached a little bit, and basically just pushing and pulling with that smudge tool here and there in little areas helps to give that little bit of realistic attachment. So now that I did that, I'm going to go to the top of my frame. So we have the shadow, we have the mask, we have the photo, we have the frame. Now I want to add a new layer above the frame, create new layer icon, and I want to clip that to the frame. So again, you have your little finger here, hold down the Alt till you, and slide your hand down with the mouse till you get to the where they both meet, and left click with your mouse to clip it. So now I want to create a gradient. So after I've gone ahead and I've adjusted that, I want to go ahead and go up to the frame layer. I'm going to create a new layer above that, right click with my mouse to create clipping mask, or like I said before, the shortcut with the hand, the Alt tool, and then you get the little arrow and the box, and clip that. And I'm going to select the gradient tool. It's with the flood, and with your paint bucket tool, then there's the gradient tool. I want to select that. I'm going to make sure that my foreground is black. Your black and white default is right here, so I just clicked and make that black. And you can see up here with the gradient toolbar, it shows from black to transparent. If it doesn't show black to transparent, you can always select that by clicking on this down arrow. This will give you the little box of different gradients, and you want the black to transparent, because what we want to do is create the look of the bend. So we're going to, in that blank layer above the frame, we're going to use the crosshairs and just drag your mouse down just the top quarter, and you get this, so it looks like it's bending. Now that's a little bit dark. I'm going to change my blend mode to linear burn, and then I'm going to slide down the opacity, and obviously this is to taste. I'm going to go down to about, about a 68% here. Like I said, it's all subject to taste. So now you get the illusion of this bending, as if there was tape, or it got caught or something and it's coming off the paper. Here it's attached, here it's coming off the paper. So this is what's giving you that illusion. So I want to add some elements. I'm going to grab some elements now. This feather I want. I'm going to flip it, transform, I want it horizontal because I want to face it the other direction. Need to make it smaller. So we grab the transform tool, buttons, angle it a little bit. So now we resize that, place it where we want. So there is my feather. I'm going to, I just needed to put the mover tool there. So now I'm adding a shadow. Again, we can click the FX or use a shadow style that you already have that you want to use, and then you can manipulate that if you choose to afterwards. Let's see, I'm going to use a 45-degree angle. I'm using Linear Burn as my blend mode, my color somewhere around here for a brownish shade. And what the Linear Burn does is it grabs and makes it deeper with the background paper. It reflects off the background. So that's why you want the Linear Burn mode as opposed to Multiply. Multiply is generally just black and it's very stark, whereas with the Linear Burn you get some of the pigment or some of the tones from the background paper that comes through, so it makes a better shadow. The distance I'm gonna just leave small. I'm gonna leave that about 4 I think we had before, so I'm gonna go ahead and use 4. The size, as you can see, well, the distance, let's make it a little bit further. The size softens it. See if it's 0, see how stark it is, and looking at the shadow. And if you bring it up a little bit, it will go ahead and make that a little bit softer. I'm going to make that about, I don't know, about 8. That'll work. Now here I'm going to create the layer again. I'm going to split out that shadow by create layer, because what I want to do is I want to do edit, transform, and I'm going to rotate that shadow just a tad so it actually gives that, and just grab it and slide it a little bit so that it gives dimension, but it's angled, so it looks like it's coming off the paper. You can always adjust the fill too. Just slide that down a little bit. Okay. I want to grab a brad and file, place, grab the brad, because that's going to be pinning down the feather. It's going to be adhering the feather. That's a good size. Right now it's between the feather and the shadow, so I'm going to just grab the layer and drag it above the feather. We're going to add that shadow again. And like I said, you can just grab the shadow and make it your own by just sliding it. And that works. I'm satisfied with that. Now I want to add a ribbon. Grab that, resize it, and as I was saying before, I want to place this under the brad because the brad is adhering it to the page. Well, I'm going to add a solid color, and I'm going to make that about a rusty color, and I'm going to clip that to the ribbon, create clipping mask, and I want to add not only a shadow to this but also a stroke, so I can do that at the same time. Click on the FX, do the drop shadow, And we will add a stroke. Color I'm going to use for the stroke is going to be this color here, the C1B191. Inside blend mode is normal, and that's the color. And so now it creates this lovely little shadow. And I'm going to again separate the shadow. I'm going to create layers so I can separate the shadow. Now what it does is, now I've lost the stroke, so I'm going to grab the stroke layer and put that above the solid color layer that we put before. So it puts the stroke out on the outside of the ribbon again. And now I want to play with the shadow. So I'm going to click on that shadow layer, and again we're going to grab that, just put that back on paint, and we're going to grab the smudge tool again. So here we go, because what we want to do is we want to make this thinner in the center. I'm going to use the left bracket key to make my smudge tool smaller, and just by moving up that shadow we've now made it cling to the center. And now I'm going to change, I'm going to do transform, and I want to use warp. And what this is going to do is I'm going to grab these little corners, and that is warping the shadow underneath so that it looks like it's lifting off the paper. Just grab the little bounding tools, so it'll end up, if you can see, I've made it, these corners I'm pulling in so it will arch like this, that shadow, so it will look like an arch. Right. Click that, and so now you can see the bend in that shadow. If you want to yank it down a little bit, you can, but so now it looks as if it's lifting off the paper. So now you can, above the stroke layer, add, click on your text tool. I want it the same shade as the ribbon edging, so I'm going to just click on my color swatches and grab the same color, and I'm going to just type autumn leaves. All in caps. And I'm going to center that where I need it. I'm going to just spread this out just a tad. And I want to just slide this down just a little bit, so I'm just going to grab my text, my ribbon pieces through the shadow, and I hold down the shift and click here, and that will select them all, just so I can slide this down so it's not hiding completely, but it's still showing like it's tacked in here and it's coming off the page. So there's that style. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a few more elements before we get to the flowers. Basically the way I manipulated the shadows the same way, so I'm going to do this real quick, just grabbing a few items and just what I was doing before as far as using the bounding boxes, doing quick shadows that I already have set up here. And like I said, just adding, these are the same style of shadows I was doing before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I'm just going to resize. That looks good. And now with the flowers, I'm going to start adding the flowers back on. I'm going to start with this rich red flower. And based on the flowers, now we're getting into more dimension because they are now above the frame. So your frame is fairly flat onto the background. Now we're going to be adding some more dimension with the flowers. They're going to be clustered. So the lower flowers are going to be a different distance than what you had on the frame. So again, we're going to be manipulating those shadows. Your distance is going to be a little bit more. I'll just change the angle. Again, I'm still keeping it at linear burn, and again, I can just grab the shadow and I can change that. It doesn't have to be any particular angle. It's and if you wanted additional, you can just double click on this while you have the layer style window open. You can just go ahead and add that other shadow. It's kind of dark. We can just dial down the opacity. So you have a little bit more shadow. And as you can see, the further it gets away with the distance, the softer that shadow is going to be. So that looks pretty good. Now, let's see. I want to add a few more flowers. So I want to grab the next flower, and that's going to be the silver flower. And as you can see, I'm placing that above the rich red flower, so the dimension is going to be a little bit bigger. Again, grabbing the drop shadow style, adding a little bit more dimension. I can move it around, get it where I want, and an additional one if I choose. You can also separate, like I did before, separate the shadow by right-clicking and create new layer, and you can do that, and you'll have 2 additional shadow layers that you can play around with and manipulate as well. I'm going to add some of that purple flower in there for color and for more dimension. The first one I'm going to be putting in is going to be underneath that red, rich flower. I'm going to rotate it a little bit with the bounding boxes and place it up there. And we'll go ahead, again, this is when you click on the drop shadow for the styles, it pretty much will put like a default. And you can just manipulate the shadow how you want it there. Make it a little darker. We had adjusted one of them before, made it. And that looks good. Now I'm just going to duplicate this purple flower element. We'll rotate it. And we'll move that down and we'll place it in between the purple and the white, because we want some color. And let's see. And I'm going to duplicate, and we're going to place that over here, rotate that around. And let's transform, make that a little bit larger, just so you can get some more dimension, and maybe we'll just adjust that shadow just a tad. Bring it down, maybe duplicate the shadow. And there you go. One other thing I want to do is I'm going to put my quote that I grabbed from the internet. It's autumn is a second spring when every leaf is a flower. I'm just going to highlight this, right click and copy, and then go back to my working page. And we're going to go ahead and use Tahoma as the font, or I'm sorry, yes, as the font, and I have it here set as 13. And now I'm going to right click and then paste. I'm going to go ahead and highlight again, use that. To change the color, I'm going to use the same color. It's a little bit, let's see, let's make it a little bit darker so we can read it. And now just put it where we want it. And there you go. That's all there is to it. Basically, what we went through was making sure that there's some dimension with these flowers. As I said, if it's flat against the background, your distance is going to be shorter. And it looks, I think it looks pretty good. It kind of looks like these are coming off the page, and this looks kind of bent. And basically that looks like, you know, the old school way of us doing our scrapbooks from way back when with the construction paper. Only this is much prettier, and it's I really like it. So I hope you do too. I hope this helped you with some information, and have fun scrapping.